Okay, welcome everybody. It's time to have another Gerber Business Roundtable. And today we have a guest, Garrett, with us here today. And we're going to talk a little bit about why project management is changing and what businesses actually need now. So just to give a little intro, you guys know me and my project management background. So this is a very exciting discussion for me. Garrett is traditionally an M&A integration expert and has done a lot of work within structure. And go ahead, Garrett, you just introduce yourself, give a little bit more of a spiel to us.
Thank you so much, Emily. I really appreciate you having me on the conversation today, and I'm definitely excited to get into it. So my background is a little bit mixed and varied. I come from a bit of the technical side as well as project management woven throughout my career. Most recently, having worked with Instructure on their mergers and acquisitions, as well as helping with technical program management, spanning multiple different departments and initiatives. So a lot of this that I think we're going to be talking about today is very near and dear to my heart, and I'm excited to get into it with you.
Yeah, I'm so grateful for your time and everything. This is going to be amazing. And specifically in my work, working on government contracts and with businesses in general, I have seen the importance of a good, valuable PMO, or at least somebody that's coming in, with the project management background that we have. Coming in, supporting leadership and supporting the workers or the engineers in order to remove obstacles so that the work can get done and the vision is realized. So that's what we're going to talk about today, just about how project management, PMOs, and organizational execution are evolving, especially as businesses adopt new technologies, like you mentioned, and all of your expertise in the tech industry there, and also rethinking how work gets done. So as we talk about technology, I also have background in the higher ed, as well as consulting. So these things have been really relevant in the worlds that I have been in. Let's talk a little bit about how project management and execution have changed in today's environment, Garrett.
That's a good question, and I think it's super relevant, especially as we've seen the pace of technology just dial up to 11. We've got AI and tools and all sorts of things coming at us, and in some of these situations, I really like to go back to almost the first principles. What are we really trying to do as either project managers, program managers, or as a centralized PMO? What is our focus, that North Star? And I really pull that out because if we don't have a clear focus of what we do and it's just project chaos and we try to just manage chaos, that isn't a clear enough directive at times to get people on board with what we're trying to do. If our goal is to, deliver specific projects so that, the business can do something, what is the so what? And if we're thinking about that in those terms, the so what, and then coupled with that, the clarity ideally we bring. If we add clarity to every project and people know if they bring in an Emily or a Garrett, their projects, everybody's going to know who's doing what, when, and what direction they're headed. That gets rid of a lot of the noise. It doesn't matter what tools you use. It doesn't matter if you're using, bi-weekly sprints or weekly sprints or how that looks. If everybody knows the direction and who's doing what when, we add a little bit more peace.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the goal.
I really like what you brought up. I think that vision and mission have a huge part to play in a lot of the technology adoption that's going on right now. We've talked in past videos with other guests about how, AI is the new tech and the industrial revolution and the printing press. Like, this is a similar wave. And just like in times past, I feel like if we adopt right away without considering the vision of the company or the mission of the company and the direction that we're going, and then put the steps in place, it's going to be very chaotic. So, yeah, sorry, did you have something to add to that?
No, I think that's super valid, that if we are ideally positioning ourselves with whatever technology we're using to reduce that chaos, that helps significantly. That people should feel comfortable and that we bring just a calming effect when we're in the room. If we're constantly chasing the newest, shiniest tool without maybe fully understanding the downstream ramifications, that might not be positioning ourselves as that calm professional in the room.
Yeah, and technology can only do so much. Technology can support and streamline processes, but let's talk a little bit about the human in the lead. At first, when AI started coming out and all of these new automations, I'm on top of it. I love technology. I'm an early adopter, but I'm a medium implementer. I like to understand the technology. I like to see the mistakes that are happening right away, watch somebody else make them, and take the vision of where I'm trying to go and apply the automations to it. So the first step that I had seen was human in the loop. And just talking about how important it is to keep a human in the loop. But then I feel like now with the changes in the full scale adoption of all of this technology, where companies are changing their full scale models right away, we need to talk a little bit more about human in the lead and how having somebody with the skills having someone with the skills that understands the vision that the company is trying to go and the direction that the company is trying to go and the technology that's underneath them. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how the right plan could be implemented with a human in the lead, or a negative consequence that you may have seen.
Oh, yes. I like the way you're framing that shift, because if we are moving to ensuring humans are in the lead, it actually, I think the terminology may change eventually, but it points out something that I think is critical. And that critical piece is really that a lot of the business, a lot of the things that we're doing actually should support other humans. So if it's humans supporting humans at some point, when we get down to the most fundamental, we need to help other people in some form. And the tools we're using, be it AI, email, Slack, whatever those are, if they're not supporting those relationships and those connections, we've probably gone astray. And so if we have an entire business that is an AI business that only helps AI businesses ad infinitum, all of a sudden we have an ecosystem that doesn't actually translate back to humans ever. That whole structure doesn't provide humanity with, or people with, anything valuable then. So if the purpose is to have better relationships, work more efficiently with each other, we need to keep that kind of at top of mind. And so when you say, human-led, I think that's getting back to the foundation that we really need to focus on. How are we talking with other people? If we just say, I'll have my AI talk to your AI, and they talk back and forth, and nothing ever comes from it, we kind of backed ourselves into a corner, and that's awkward because maybe our AIs talked forever, but did it help us as people? Did it help our relationship, what we're trying to do? And so I like how AI is causing some people to take a little bit of a step back, that maybe having that coffee with somebody, the project's going astray. One of my favorite things to do at times with engineers would bring a 6-pack of sodas, or their favorite cookies or things. And when we were in the office, I was not above bribing, and bribing's a strong word, bear with me, but bribing the people around me with snacks, with goodies. Hey, here's a coffee, here's something. I'd use Reese's peanut butter cups, or crispy, was it the crispy treats? I'd leave those on people's desks.
Crispy treats, yeah.
Exactly, because that's a human touch point, a connection. I've sent people cards because people like positive interactions with others. And if we can keep positive interactions going and use AI as a tool to make more positive interactions happen, then it's a force for good. If we use it just as to try to offload human relationships, I think we've totally missed the mark. And we've seen it in the news and multiple places where people are almost having relationships outsourced to AI. I think that kind of circumvents the whole humanity point of what are we doing?
Yeah, I would agree. I think that that's a slippery slope. And, I am all for technology, but I also am all for technology for the purpose of doing good. And having that frame of mind when you go in to utilize the technology. I know that I have used ChatGPT or Claude ad nauseum, right? Like to try to figure something out. And it's frustrating because it keeps changing its mind. And so you really have to have a structure in place for the direction that you want to go. Let's talk a little bit about the technology gap, maybe where tools help and where they don't. So what I've seen is that when PMOs go away, the work doesn't go away. And what actually ends up happening is that it disappears the visibility and the coordination and the follow through. And that's usually when leaders start feeling like everything is harder, but they can't pinpoint why. So have you seen anything like this? Or maybe what does your experience teach you about how we can, like where the gaps are?
Definitely. That's a good question. And I'm going to scrub names from maybe this conversation, but I've certainly seen where a relatively large business had a robust PMO and it accidentally, unintentionally maybe scaled where a large PMO isn't necessarily an efficient PMO. And so it gets bigger and more rules are created, which have good intent. I think people oftentimes create structure and process with a positive intent, sometimes losing track of that people or the human side connection. And when that happens, leaders can look and say, hey, there's this dollar, this budget that is going towards these projects, and it feels clunky. And they'll take a vibe check almost going, dollars, clunky, I don't like it. And so then the pendulum starts to swing. They look where budget cuts can happen, and the pendulum swings back to, oh, maybe we don't need something that feels clunky, and they get rid of a PMO. And I came into a rebuild of a PMO at one point. So the company had a big one. It wasn't functioning like it should. They trimmed it back to 0, spent some time and went, wait a second, we actually need help with our projects. We need to get things to a finish line. We need to complete something. And so then they built a PMO basically from scratch, new individuals, and that PMO stayed small, tight, and mighty, and was really focused on the human side. Because if you cap the amount of maybe headcount, you're capping the amount of processes at times, and then you're focused on a single North Star. We handled these type of projects to this type of completion, and it worked fantastically well. Unfortunately, if that type of PMO, I'm not saying this happened, but if you start to add too many structures or not enough people-centric processes, then it can start to swing back, get bloated again, and then looks like something ready for the chopping block. So I think that's a common back and forth tug of war that can happen without really strict intentionality and guardrails around what is the PMO trying to do? How do we make sure we keep this an experience that people want to come back to? That we bring a PMO in, we've got the experts in the room now. They will help us lower the temperature, calm things down. Everybody knows their process is, who's doing what and who's doing it when, in direction of that North Star, and it works great. When you start to deviate from that, build up too much cumbersomeness around it, I think the executives start to feel that. And that's when PMOs are more quickly added to a chopping block.
Yeah, I have a lot of experience in what you're talking about, and I really appreciate, I've seen the value, and I was able to build a PMO. There was already an EPMO, so Executive Program Management Office. I built something kind of secondary to those processes that was a really good thing that was focused on building communication with all of the PMs at that company. And it was huge because it was the first time that these PMs, they had been siloed and they had created all of their own processes. And then this, we did PM roundtables where we discussed like the struggles that they had, and we wrote them down and tried to go back and work with accounting or work with different operations departments that were, hindering or the obstacles to the PM's struggles. And that flow is really important. And there's, if you don't have that, sometimes automations can help, sometimes AI can help, but you need a person that thinks, that has the overall understanding of kind of how these things are supposed to operate. Maybe an MBA, or maybe like some big picture vision where they've got a lot of experience. Maybe just somebody that's really good with people, and those people things can get worked out. And AI and automations can be utilized in order to fix problems that the human sees.
Yes.
Because the human is going to care what happens to the other humans. So I think that's maybe a piece that we're kind of struggling with. Like, I've utilized technology and I've been like, well, that was the wrong answer, or that was a really good answer. And I think that there is this gap with technology where processes don't improve because maybe you're switching them out all the time and there's no room for consistency. Or like you said, maybe there's too much consistency and not enough agility. And the human can take the temperature of what that flow is supposed to look like.
Exactly. And I think if we're using technology well, especially something as unusual and interesting as AI has proven itself to be, you can both dial up that consistency as well as some of that agility, which sounds counterintuitive in traditional senses. But if we're using our tools correctly, and we can get into maybe how evolutions of AI might help, but it really allows us more flexibility and that structure if we've thought about it and built it in from the beginning. It doesn't happen organically from what I've seen, though, that you don't just spontaneously encourage people to use AI and all of a sudden their processes get better. Unfortunately, that's not the case. You have to intentionally automate, intentionally, figure out where the pain points of the people are and get rid of them.
Well, I have experience with that too. I have seen where, the early adopters, the leadership, and they say, we really need you guys to do more with less. So we recommend you to utilize technology and, just go crazy, like use it. And without that structure in place of who should use what, and maybe it is an evolution, it is a process. But I know that there were people at that company that kind of backpedaled a little bit because they didn't know how, they didn't maybe have as much training or love for technology, and they were left to try to figure it out on their own. So maybe let's talk a little bit about and I've talked about this on another call too. What's the benefit to bringing in training when you bring in a new technology and you want your company to adopt quickly? Like, maybe let's talk about that for a minute.
Oh, that's a good question. So I think the right training is important. When email started, coming out, there was this, I learned about email in college, started using it. Now, if you just go into a company that maybe had never used email before, and I know I'm going back, way far, if you tell people just use more email, just send more emails, that's not going to make anybody's life better. And I think we're all at the point now where there's a reason Slack and Teams and all the other tools we have are kind of replacing email is because more email isn't necessarily better. Same kind of logic, I think, could be applied to Slack or Teams or whatever chat tool. If you tell your employees to just send more messages to each other, that doesn't help. So we all kind of organically mostly figured out how to manage email. When I was at one of my first companies, I actually had somebody pull me aside and said, time out. you're going to get 200 emails a day here. Let's work and train you on the process on how to manage 200 plus emails a day and how you need to rank, prioritize, filter, sort, and set up a structure and system around that. Now, I've been in college and I've used email, but that's not a college course you take on how to handle a deluge or like that inundated deluge of just email noise. Luckily, I had a boss that was willing to sit down and do that with me. I think we're at the exact same inflection point here in the modern business world. So I tell that story because if we have the ability to train people on how to use AI, levels of AI, where to integrate, how to use it effectively, as opposed to just chat with AI more, we have the ability to shape the culture around it, as well as ensure the tool is effective. Not just sending more emails, that's not effective. Not just asking more chatbot questions and claiming that can get rid of headcount, that's not effective either. We've got to figure out how to bring in the right knowledge. Now, a lot of people think they're AI experts, and they're not. So we've got to be careful on the training. What is the intent, the purpose? Going back to that North Star conversation, what are we trying to get the tools to actually do? Yes, they're fancy and shiny. What do they do? And then use what do they do to how do they help us?
Yeah, I love that a lot. I think that also there's times when, this just came to my mind while you were talking, when maybe leadership is trying to implement change and they say, for instance, like, I'm going to train you to automate or to on how to read all of these emails, this deluge of emails, right? And then I'm coming into that job and I say, as a consultant, I always am questioning and I'm always trying to apply new information and I'm trying to utilize the tools that we have in order to make the best choice possible. And maybe leadership, they don't have to know about all of the tools and how every single piece of it works. They just need to hire people that have a consulting mindset, but that are willing to go with the flow also. So for instance, when I first started working for the government, one of my projects was to set up this new senior financial analyst like role. And I went in and they're like, this is how the role works. And I said, oh, really? Okay, well, teach me how it has been done. I think it's really important to show gratitude for the experiences that have gone on before you, because that is their knowledge and that came from them trying new things, right? So appreciate what's come before you, but also learn to look at it with a consulting mindset and say, maybe with my skills, maybe I can figure out a different way. And I applied different process management, project management principles, different business management principles, and technology, and came back with a more structured process that we ended up adopting for a procedure guide that saved, it's a lot of times just having the right person in the right place saves so much time and money. So go ahead.
I was going to say, that's a beautiful story. I love how you pulled out that kind of consulting mindset. That is both rare and I believe infinitely valuable. And the PMO orgs are almost the perfect location for that mindset to reside in an organization. That a good PMO can be those leaders to really help cultivate in the projects they're touching, helping ensure people are using, best practices or using tools in cool ways, giving some of those trainings out. I love that you were able to approach that and just say, hey, I appreciate what you've done. I'm learning from you. This foundational knowledge is critical. Now let's take it to that next level. That's such a good story. I love it.
Yeah, thanks. It really ties in a lot about the human element, bridging people, process, and execution. So let's switch roles to that section now. We're going to talk a little bit about those things. So a lot of times when things feel stuck or chaotic, leaders assume that they need to hire. But often what I find is that the real issue is unclear ownership, maybe too many competing priorities, maybe lack of structure. If you hire someone into a situation like that, no matter how awesome they are, sometimes they're not even going to be successful. So let's talk about the need for maybe ongoing coordination, alignment, decision-making, something along those lines that you've experienced.
So what you just described and laid out, I think, is sadly an often repeated story, that you may have a bit of chaos and noise, and trying to structure that is almost impossible if you're just using headcount or dropping somebody with inadequate training support into the middle of it and expecting somehow something to come out of it. Honestly, just yesterday, my wife and I were talking about the movie The Devil Wears Prada, because I think it's a great analogy for something. And I think the second movie's come out. Haven't seen the second movie, but on the first one, Anne Hathaway is, basically an executive assistant, project manager, does a little bit of everything, is just dropped in without direction, support, and it's chaos. Now, she overcomes it, but that story, that saga of those pain points, I think are super real. A lot of us have experienced them, and it just shows, yes, it's a dramatized movie, but it shows exactly, I think, what sometimes happens in the workplace. And it doesn't always have the same happy ending-ish that The Devil Wears Prada had. We often don't necessarily have the same cinematic ending when we go through that struggle in a business environment.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen a lot of times where, I work with, previous to the government, I worked with small business owners, and they would say, I need you to do marketing right now. And I'm like, well, do you know what the vision is of your company? And they're like, no, but I need you to spend this amount of time on marketing, and we need to make sure that we hire a person for this other thing. And I'm like, I really think that you can probably solve the problem that you're trying to solve by just doing these processes, getting them in alignment, and being able to be steady and constant on things. And changing is good, but being able to have a non-chaotic flow for a little while. I always recommend companies, and I know that this never ever ends up working, but if it's possible, to take a pause while you make a big corporate change, to be able to say, company retreat, we are out of office for this amount of time or whatever, this is the time we're going to be implementing a full-scale change that's going to be beneficial for our company. And hopefully all the ships can stop. Understandably, that's really hard because you need income. But if there's at all any way to kind of stop the presses for just a little beat so that you can implement new changes or new ownership or new leadership, that's a really good opportunity to take, to be able to kind of slow it down, get the process straight, get the training in place, and then open the floodgates, have the person run things. Things would move much smoother if we could do things like that.
Oh, certainly. And I think it goes back to the beginning of the conversation. What is that North Star? Who's doing what? You mentioned swim lanes at the beginning. Whose roles and responsibilities are each action, and then just being intentional about building that plan. And it is so hard to do that in the midst of the rest of the chaos. And that's why you got to take that step back sometimes, or at least double down on ensuring that you've got the North Star, you've got the swim lanes, the expectations, and you're intentional. Without that intentionality that a PMO or that consulting mindset can bring, it makes projects infinitely harder and just dials up that risk meter. That a project without intentionality or an initiative without it is not one you want to bet the house on.
Right. Yeah. So I totally agree with that. I think that's spot on. what we are seeing right now in the current industry environment is companies utilizing AI, replacing a lot of the workers with bots, and having someone that's leadership that's been around for a long time be in charge of that. And then there's engineers underneath. So, you know, we're talking, what we're talking about right now is kind of a new model that companies are experimenting with. What I'm seeing is that they have fully adopted, a lot of those companies, that type of a model, and they're realizing that the human approach and their skill level, maybe of that leader who's over the AI bots, and then the engineers are there too, maybe doesn't have the full knowledge of what questions to ask or how to manage an AI team, and they don't understand the work that the engineers do. And so that can be a huge problem. And I think that that's kind of creating this need for fractional workers to be able to come on. You and I are both like in the fractional world right now. And that's kind of a lot of fun to be able to pick and choose and do things like that. Let's talk about what it means to a company that's striving to have, PMO style leadership in this AI world with maybe a fractional, flexible, outcome focused support.
So that is kind of a really interesting point we're at right now, is depending on the size of the company, this fractional work, especially coupled with AI efficiencies, because there are some things you can do well with AI. I don't believe it gets rid of people, because people have to be the heart and soul in places. So if you are able to efficiently help a business, especially if you're bringing the project management mindset coupled with that consulting philosophy and brain space, you really have a cool opportunity to help businesses that may not have been able to afford or been able to step into leveraging a PMO previously. So you're really opening up opportunities for more companies to get that North Star intentionality and focus around what they're trying to do. And so that part, I think, is really cool, that now you can have individuals with this PMO background, folks who have the ability to see what needs to be connected and where, and build those relationships, and then do it very, very well for multiple businesses at the same time who've never accessed it before. That is super cool. And I think foundationally a shift in where some of the opportunities lie right now.
Yeah, I think it's huge, mostly for small to medium-sized businesses, that are trying to figure things out. They have all this access to high-level professionals where they didn't before, and they can have them for just a small implementation project that they need to take on. Or something short term, and then that gets and I've worked in education, I've worked in consulting with all the different industries, I've worked in government contracts, and now doing fractional work with for mid-sized companies like this, and I think that the thing that is making me so much better is seeing chaos in different industries, because I can identify it everywhere. And you, I'm sure, are the same. Like, you're able to utilize those skills to kind of hone in on, what is it that, and when you meet with a customer, a new client, first time, they're all freaked out and it's huge and it's an issue. And you're like, thank you for coming. I know exactly what you're going through. Here are the tools that we need to implement. So can you talk a little bit about that? Why more organizations, maybe this is a huge benefit. We talked about that. Maybe the larger companies, what about the larger companies that have made the decision to kind of slash a lot of the workforce, and they can still hire the fractional work?
Yes, I think a lot of the work still has to get done. And an agent AI positioned tool can help an actual individual do a lot of cool things. At the same time, it can help them delete an entire code base. And we've seen that a few times, or accidentally publish your entire code base on the internet. We've seen that a few times. And like, there's multiple companies that are having these massive oopses. And I kind of think of it like car maintenance. You can get away without changing your oil in your car for longer than you should. You can get away driving on bald tires. You can get away with, that rattle or the bump. And it may seem like you're saving money, that this is great. We're saving some. I didn't spend, $50 on an oil change this month. Look at me. I'm, budgeting very smart. But long term, if it blows up your engine, if your code base gets published online or deleted or any one of a number of different things, that's actually not saving you money. And so I think we're at that pendulum swing right now where it looks really good almost not to have some of that maintenance. And as we start to maybe swing back and we realize that these individuals who can bring in some of that fractional PMO support, who have seen the problems 6 months before they occur, and start letting people know, hey, if we head down this path, we're going to have problems. I've implemented software like this before, and if we don't do these couple things, then by the time it comes due to do our UAT, we're going to miss these things. Or hypothetically, one of 100 different situations you and I have probably both seen before, doing that preemptive maintenance early is super critical. And even just fractional efforts by a really high caliber professional can help head off some of those bigger problems later on. Now, ideally, they have full-time professionals or maybe individuals in-house who can help, but bringing on that extra support for those big projects or just an extra sanity check. Your background is super varied and diverse. Knowing some of the things you know and have seen would be of value to just about any company as they're rolling out these big initiatives, especially if you can't let it go wrong. It's risk mitigation. It helps ensure that there aren't those problems in the future.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that this conversation today has been very valuable for me. I hope for the viewers here. And I think just as a closing thought, at the end of the day, most businesses don't struggle necessarily because they don't have ideas. They struggle because they don't have the structure and alignment to keep things moving. And like we said before, in the right direction, with the right team. And so that's where this kind of work really becomes valuable. Do you have any maybe practical insights for business leaders trying to navigate these changes? Or, what would your last thoughts you'd like to leave with us be?
So the biggest one I've seen is continually focus on communicating that North Star. Maybe you as a business leader know exactly where you're headed. If your team doesn't, then that's an easy opportunity to just build alignment. So if you have that North Star, you communicate it with your team, that allows you to lay that foundation of intentionality. North Star, intentionality, you hit those and knock those out of the park. The amount of trickle-down effect that has is just massively outsized. Focus on those two things. If those were the only things I could leave with you today, build that North Star, use that to get intentionality of everybody below you running in the same direction, and the return on that investment is incredible.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I love your optimistic look at everything. I know that for a lot of the viewers, things have been a struggle lately with new adoptions and making decisions. And, Garrett and I, we want to let you know you're not alone in this. There's a lot of help, and Garrett's offered to be able to be of service to anybody that wants to have a conversation. I'm open as well. Definitely appreciate his expertise and tech background and all of the experience that he has, mergers and acquisitions, and software implementation development, those sides of things. And so if there's anybody that needs more information or feels like they need more support fractionally or as a friend, like, we're here for you and just want to help you do the good that you're trying to do in the world. And I think that's my last little tidbit. Do you have anything else, Garrett?
No, definitely. Thank you so much for that, Emily. Love ending on the positive note there. If anybody wants to reach out, have a virtual cup of coffee, if I can support you, have a conversation, brainstorm, please reach out. I'm here. I want to make the world a better place. As you said, Emily, let's go and do this.
Let's do it. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye,
See you.
everybody.